Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. This is a special episode today because we're not actually doing a week in games, and we're not doing a review. So what the heck am I doing? Well, over time, I've talked a lot about something called coin games, and lots of people have said, I don't even know what that is. Like, what does that even mean? And I kind of took that to heart, and I decided to kind of explain to people who don't normally get in the know on deep, dark corners of the gaming world what a coin game is. And I thought I'd do a little visual representation and kind of go over some kind of nuances about or idiosyncrasies about coin games that are different from other games you may play and why. I'm doing this mostly for people who've not heard of them, so I know a lot of you out there have. Some of my explanations may not be 100% like as precise as they ought to be. Feel free to chime in and kind of give your own kind of like take on it. That's fine. Mostly it's just sort of to give sort of an on-ramp to people on what is different about a coin game, particularly those who take a look at a picture of one or see one on a board during a convention like, So I wanted to kind of do that. I'll start off with a definition of what a coin game is. The official definition, it's a game about counterinsurgency. To the layman, that might not mean a lot to go on. There's a map. There's always a map. There are insurgents, generally those that disrupt the status quo. And then there are counterinsurgent presence, usually sort of an iron fiscal fist and the quagmiring bureaucracy to boot. Some examples are some games that you may have heard of or not. Andrian Abyss, Cuba Libre, which is probably the easiest one to learn, FYI. A Distant Plain, which deals with the Afghanistan conflicts over the last couple decades. Liberty or Death, which actually segues into the American Revolution. Falling Sky, which takes us back to Rome in France or Gaul. Colonial Twilight, which covers the Algerian-French conflicts post-World War II. Pendragon, which, well, hopefully you know that's Britain. And upcoming is Gandhi, which is the game I'm actually going to use as an example since it just came in. It's there on my board. On my board. That way. Apparently I can't handle a camera. And so we're going to go over that. I'm actually going to move from here, the desk camera, over to the mobile camera, so that as I talk about what a coin game is, I can explain it and sort of show you the map and you can say. So let's do that now. Okay. We're going to use Gandhi, the latest coin game, to kind of visually go over some of the things about a coin game that are different than what conventional gamers may expect from a game that involves conflict or war or the appearance of war and such. Although Gandhi's kind of an unusual one for that, because Gandhi actually has ways that leverage non-violent actions instead, but don't let that fool you. Because there are some things about coin games that are very consistent across each and every coin game for the most part. And you'll hear that a lot, for the most part, because every coin game has little nuances and exceptions that may look like there's an identical one-to-one relationship between a certain aspect of it, like, say, what operations you can do. But you look deeper and you'll see just a few tweaks and turns here that help make it thematically imbued into whatever it is the coin game is representing. You'll see here there's quite a few coin games. There's Liberty or Death, Colonial Twilight, Distant Plain, Pendragon. Those are just a few of the ones I have. But in general, they all follow a similar flow. So let's go over it. First off, the biggest, I think, the attributes of a coin game, the biggest aspect that I think that new gamers or people that I show them to locally that haven't played one before is the conventional battle lines are not present. For example, look at this map, and what are you going to see? You're going to see all kinds of units of the 4 different factions that play a part in this coin game, but you're going to see them all interspersed. You're going to see units coexisting here. You're going to see many units coexisting in all of these territories and regions. They all coexist. This isn't like Axis and Allies or Risk, Memoir 44, etc. Because it just isn't. It isn't that way. I mean, it's in those games you feel compelled to play armies and tanks, and for example, be like, yeah, I'm going to march these guys up here, and now I take over this, and now I take over this, and or you look and go, wow, we've got our battle line up here as we're making our way forward, the Eastern Front. That just doesn't exist in a coin game. It doesn't mean to say there aren't battles or battle units present. They are. But amassing them as overarching weapons to take over an entire region, that's not what the game is about, and not what you'll wind up having. It's the units are not direct victory paths that you might be accustomed to as, say, Axis and Allies. When I move over here and I take over, it's not a grand takeover game. And the other thing to note is that timely placement and activation is way more important than overwhelming force placement. So you're not going to go build a huge army here and then march with your killer stack all the way through. That's not how it works. So that's something to kind of be in mind. So it's basically conventional battle lines are not present in coin games. Following up on that, and similar to it, is that area control is not the ultimate goal. It is the goal for some factions, but almost never is it the goal for every faction. For example, you'll see control markers here, and you'll see this region has control, control, control. Control is only relevant for certain factions, and it's not a direct mapping to who's winning. And that's something that's interesting too. You're used to saying, I control these regions, therefore I have 60% of the map. That isn't of even any consequence to some of the factions that are like, well, you know what, I don't care based on the victory conditions that I have, how much control you have. I only care that these other things happen. And that's a little different than what you can expect from just a sort of a common, basic war game, battle game. Now, the units do act in a capacity for control, but not always as a direct contributor to your personal victory conditions. For example, here, the Raj have control markers, and for them, yes, it does matter how many they have. Does that mean that they, what does it do? I mean, for sometimes, like you might think in a war game that, oh, I have control, therefore no one can enter here without fighting me. Well, that's not true. That's not how it happens in a coin game. Control is just one of the many facets of victory conditions or enablers that you can have to do actions. For example, there are certain actions that the Raj could not do if they didn't have control of a region. That doesn't keep any of the other regions from saying, hey, I'm gonna move in here. Yay! And such. So that's another thing that is interesting, is that area control is not the ultimate goal. The other aspect, following up on that, is that control and support are two different concepts. Now notice here you've got control and passive support. You have regions that have control and opposition. Just because you control a region does not mean you have support of that region. And support is also another input into the game where certain actions are allowed or disallowed based on whether you have support in that region, not control. And so it matters greatly. For example, the Raj, again, as a victory condition, having control and support is important. But you can mess with support even in a place that has control. Just think of it as you might control the region from a perspective of, political control, but you might not have people on board in that region supporting you too. And so you have that juxtaposition. Plus, that support is also or opposition is also a victory condition for some other faction. And so you've got those two layering all together. Now the control might pave the way for enhancing your options, but support or opposition does funnel more directly into victory for other factions. With that, you have to understand that, and I'm kind of keep cluing in on this, but factions, the Raj, the Resistance, the Indian Congress, the Muslim League, they have varying multi-part, often asymmetric victory conditions to each other. Sometimes they're orthogonal and sometimes they're oppositional. It's not like whoever gets X victory points first is the winner, or whoever, claims 5 of these spots on the map wins. No, it's not how that works at all. It's much more subtle than that. to actually think about. In fact, like for example here, we can show you, for the Raj to win, they have to have support plus population control. Okay. For Congress, they have to have opposition. They're going directly against. The Muslim League, they have to have Muslim opposition plus their own population, which can be completely different. And they could not very much care terribly about a couple other victory conditions of others. And then the revolutionaries, well, they want to generate unrest, population, and place some bases for their operations. So you'll see that these are all different. And so that's another thing about coin, is that you're not just going after the same goal of world conquering. Next is, there is no specific turn order, and that's another thing that kind of trips people up. The cards that you play will tell you, and each card is different. Okay, these are a little messed up, but say for example, we'll go here and do that. So whoever's turn it is going to be getting to choose with the current card, like the revolutionaries are going to get first crack at this event or this action. And then it will be the Congress, then it will be the Muslims, then it's the Raj. Now, how that works is, when it's your turn and you have a chance, this is the sequence of play. It's generally consistent about how it works, but you can play when it's your turn and you're the first one on the card, you can pass if you want to and go, you know what, I'm going to pass and I'm going to stay here because I want the next card. Because that next card has a cooler event or something. Or you can take it and you can take a different route, basically all these routes. And whenever you take a route, you've blocked it and someone else has to go along that route too. So in other words, you're constantly looking at what's best for you and what's worse for those around you. And that's what's different. And it is entirely possible that you could get cards coming up or things coming up where you don't get a turn for a while because different cards come up and you'll be like, hey, I go first. You might be a couple cards away from being able to have a turn. So when it is your turn, you want to make it count and you want to make it matter. The other thing is, depending on how powerful you want your turn to be, like I want to do my operation and a special activity, which is kind of a double whammy. You're also opening it up for the next person to come after you to also get a more powerful version of something. And that's something that you have to consider too. Once again, it's about getting the best move for yourself while giving the worst move for the guy behind you. It's sort of like paying it forward, but in an evil way. So, the event deck is actually integral to flavor, and timely use can swing the tide for a player. But coin isn't solely deck reliant too. Your turn order ebbs and flows, and sometimes in control, and sometimes at the dictation of event cards. So timing is critical. These cards matter. They have an influence, but you still have a way to work within the confines of what you get to do your best work. It's very interesting. It does mean that you're never going to count on the same game twice per se, even though you don't really have any dice aspect. Anyway, and then the other thing is that in coin games, you like everybody, on your turn you can do these 4 things or these 7 things. This is kind of similar in that coin games have a menu of operations and actions that they can perform that are tailored to the faction they're playing. Now, these aren't simple A to B actions like you can do this and you can do this. They're sort of, each action is kind of a subroutine for developers out there where you can do this action or this action or this action if Y, or this action, and then if you did that action, do this other thing. And so it does take a little bit to kind of memorize what to do, but it gets easy and it flows. The other thing is that there's similar menus. You'll see there's similarities, especially on this side. You'll see very similar operations in coin games, but there are subtleties. How you pay, how much you pay, the way you pay, how things work out. Even things named the same in different coin games might have subtly different differences in how they play out. And that's something to kind of keep in mind. But in every coin game, you're going to see everyone's going to have a sheet like this. And then the special actions, which you can do that kind of heap, like pig pile onto your main action and let you do something a little bit more situational and impacting. So yeah, that's another difference that coin games afford us. I mean, ultimately, coin games are kind of a cross-hatched lattice of overlapping motivations that each faction must navigate. In order to do well at this, you have to understand your own win conditions. You have to understand the foreign win conditions of others and being vigilant, and that can be a little dizzying for first-time peoples. But I do tell you that even though it looks so kaleidoscopic and it looks like it could be overwhelming, when you do focus and narrow down on just your part of it, or even if you're playing four-player or playing solo, focusing on your part of it at a time and then switching your mind over time it starts to become second nature, and you start to feel a flow of the game that's way more sophisticated than say, an Axis and Allies or a battle chess kind of game, or dudes on a map. And that's really where it comes alive, is when you see all these things happening and suddenly the cubes are not just cubes, they're actually your units, and you're trying to do things and pull off things that are incredible. The other final thing is that coin games, while they can be played solo, and that's how I do like to play them, nothing compares really to four veteran people playing a coin game. Mostly because coin games generally require a period of unsettling alliances with other factions in order to really be able to do your best. I think my favorite experience of all was playing Liberty or Death, the American insurrection version of this game, with three people that knew what they were doing, and me. And just seeing how it went, and seeing how the diplomacy and the jockeying and the posturing went to try to go, I'll be your friend, but let's do this, let's do that. But you have to understand that coin game users use each other knowing that other users are using them too. And so that's all well known. Sort of like Roadhouse, that old movie. Always be nice until it's time to not be nice. Anyway, in general, I would say, in summing this up, that coin games steer towards battling for hearts, minds, and psyches of the populace within the game's conflict for the advantage of the faction you're representing, using operations and actions, control and support, and being opportunistic in the timing of the turn flow and events that are revealed. So I hope that this was helpful to some of you who are wondering what a coin game entails. And thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.